He was up before the sun could do more than render the day in tones of dark gray. It had quit raining shortly before dawn, and the ground still bubbled and seethed with the liquid streaming from its pores. The sky was murky with low clouds, but they could be seen breaking up in the east, where a mountain reared from the countryside and lumbered off to the north. It was darkly furred with timber, and its top disappeared in the mists. All around lay a dense forest of gnarled white birch and spruce shaggy with moss, most of whose trunks were creased and tracked with long streamers and flows of amber. The dogs were curled up sleeping, and ravens could be heard crooking somewhere in the distance. The boy sat in his tarp listening and watching. The sound of dogs barking to be fed came from the north. More dogs sounded faintly from a westerly direction. He knew this to be dog country, that being the reason he had been directed to come to this locale in the first place. Somewhere in these hills, the old man, the father of the great race, kept a kennel, supposedly the largest in the world. His truck and trailer still hogged the middle of the narrow road, doors open and cab flooded. There were pull-outs to either side, and one of these hosted a short series of trucks and battered cars, all four-wheel drive. One of these was a 1-ton pickup with a tremendous double-layer dog box, all lacquered and trimmed with fancy painted grillwork on its doors. "Trapper Creek Kennels," said a fancy sign on its tail. The boy sat up stiffly, stretching and passing water that was too dark for his liking. His dogs were still sleeping, curled in tight balls, but he noticed that Titan's head was up and looking right at him. The dog's body gathered and ready to spring to attention. The boy looked back at him and slowly shook his head. Titan let out a brief sigh and lowered his muzzle back to his paws and closed his eyes. The boy walked up the road a bit, his leather work boots sodden and squelching in the mud. The track was little more than a bottomless quagmire, and it was obvious that there would be no continuing along it with his truck, assuming he could even get it unstuck. The old forest quickly thinned to a screen of stunted black spruce, and then gave way completely to a vast open swamp of tundra and low swale. Its surface shimmered with pools of stagnant water, and small birds fluttered and raced across islets sprinkled within its span. The far eastern horizon yellowed, and then flared orange, and steam fairly leapt from the countryside as the sun's rays touched upon it. Overhead, the clouds scudded away to the south, and the foothills of the Petersville Range showed themselves in a tapestry of russet and charcoal. Further up, the slopes were craggy, snow-capped rock and loose gray shale. The wind was fair, but coming from the north, and the winter's first frost could be felt whispering on its breath. On the far side of the swamp, a cow moose and her yearling calf came into the open and hesitated, brown dots in the distance. They milled along the edge, and then slowly began to wade into the open expanse of marsh. He turned back the way he had come and surveyed the borders at the forest's edge. The trees were gathered in a dense barrier, and he knew that they would protect the camp from the wind, should he care to place one deep enough within their fold. He waded a few paces into the swamp, but found the standing water to be too brackish for drinking, and probably loaded with giardia to boot. He needed water that would not freeze all the way through once winter hit. He followed the outlying scrub of black spruce for several hundred yards before turning into the forest to beat his way through the tangle of willow and alder. He pressed on until the brush thinned, and he found himself in a narrow grassy glade with dead brown fiddleheads reaching up to his thighs, and a shallow stream trickling along its length. He looked in the direction that the clear water flowed from, and was pleased to note that it came from the direction of the parking area where his truck sat buried.